What's going on? Yes, this is the DJI FPV Air Unit inside the iFlight DC3 HD. It's a tiny little 3-inch quad that gives you crystal clear FPV HD video, and it can record HD video on board, so it's pretty unique stuff. Now this is actually the second DJI FPV drone I've used. As you see, I've got the Good Venture Drones motors on the iFlight DC3 frame. They're very similar. One is just a whole lot bigger than the other. So let's take a look at this and what it offers you in a tiny little package. So we're going to start with some video from the DJI Air Unit. I'll show you what it looks like in the goggles in just a second. It's not all that different, but this camera is actually really good. Good dynamic range, good color. I have not done anything in the settings or in post, so you're seeing what the video turns out like. I'll switch to the goggles in a second. Now it is a cold December day outside of Chicago, and that's going to play into my flying. You'll see at the end I do crash. My thumbs actually were numb and slipped off the stick, so that does happen. But this DC3 is a fun little quad. I really like the dead cat style frame. Gets those props out of the view so you don't see them while you're flying. It's got plenty of punch, it's got plenty of power. This is kind of a smoother, just kind of flying around, getting the feel. But you know, it's a good little drone. If you're looking for something to do acro, you could probably race with this thing. The picture is so clear, I feel like it's going to make you a better pilot. So let's take a quick switch over and you can see what the goggles look like. And you can see some pixelations on the edges, and that's basically the breakup that you get, and it's still pretty darn crystal clear. So what you're looking at now is what I was looking at while I was flying, which is pretty darn good. You know, it's just a whole nother experience flying this if you're coming from analog FPV. You just don't have the breakups and the fuzz and the snow that kind of, you know, make it more difficult to fly. It's just crisp and clear and clean. I'm going to switch back to the DJI Air Unit. It's pretty easy to record both simultaneously, and actually matching them up in post like I'm doing here is also really easy because they're recorded at the same time, so you just line them up. So I'm actually flying this on my Tyrannus QX7, not the stock DJI transmitter, and I wanted to see what it was like to add my own receiver. Now it's basically like adding a receiver to any other quad. The disadvantage is that DJI transmitter is really good. You get excellent range. We're talking Crossfire-esque range coming out of that DJI transmitter. So if you're running Crossfire, then I would probably recommend add your own receiver, right? You already have that equipment. It's not an extra cost to buy that expensive transmitter. You get good range, and both the video and the radio link are separate, right? That's kind of the biggest advantage of adding your own. But if you're not flying Crossfire, you're going to get better range from that DJI transmitter than you are from, you know, an RXSR or an XM Plus. So there's that, right? If you have that equipment, sure, go right ahead. If you don't, if you're diving in, my suggestion is dive all in and get the DJI transmitter. So we're going to throw it on the bench and kind of break it down, take a look at it, compare it to the 5-inch, talk about why 3 versus 5 and why I think this might be a better drone for most people than a standard 5-inch race or freestyle quad. There goes my crash. All right, so let's take a look at what we have here in the DC3 HD from iFlight. The first thing you're going to want to know is, yes, it does have the DJI Air Unit, but no, I'm actually not using it as a receiver as I did with my first DJI drone. I wanted to see how it would perform with the Tyrannus. So I ordered the RXSR from FR Sky, and actually I had some issues with that. That was actually more my problems than the receiver, so I ended up putting in an XM Plus that I had, just because I wanted to get the feel for flying it on a different remote. And what my conclusion there is, well, you know, that's fine. If you really have to have your Tyrannus or whatnot, then do it. But unless you're flying Crossfire, the DJI remote, this guy just has great range. And the sticks are actually pretty good. They're a little bit looser than the Tyrannus, but you know, that's more of a personal preference thing. So I would actually go with that. It's actually cheaper to do it that way if, a big if here, if you already have the remote. So, but it can be done, and it flies just like any other quad would with a standard FR Sky receiver. So let's talk about what we have here. This is a Sussex F7 mini stack here. This is a 40 amp ESC along the bottom, and you'll notice that it actually uses a USB-C connector here to connect to Betaflight. Now setting it up, you know, in Betaflight is pretty much just like any other Betaflight drone. Let's take a look at these motors. I really like them. They are the Zing 1404 4600 kV motors, and they've got some serious power push in these 3-inch props. We've got the DJI left-handed circular polarized antennas coming out the back, and you'll notice there's an XT30 connector as well. I've zip tied that, and I suggest that you do to kind of keep it out of the way of the props. You'll see I've got a little electrical tape that I had to add because I didn't initially do that, and after a crash it got in there. And yes, this thing can withstand crashes. It's got good 3K fiber, they call it, a carbon fiber. Anyway, what does that mean? Well, just 3mm stick, but you know, it withstands crashes, and small drones will withstand crashes better than larger drones. Let's talk about, you know, 5-inch versus 3-inch, and what are the kind of pros and cons of each. Well, honestly, I think flying a 3-inch is a much better idea for probably most people, or at least most beginners. It's going to be quieter, it's going to be lighter, it's not going to draw a crowd, it's actually a lot easier to transport. So, you know, it's not nearly as dangerous, right? These motors spin pretty fast, and yes, they will hurt and they will cut, but that's a different story with something like this, especially pushing these awesome Good Venture drone motors. You know, this thing is going to slice and really do some damage. It's bigger, it's faster, it's louder, it's going to draw a crowd. Yes, I can do probably better tricks with this, but at the end of the day, I think this is a better option. Not just for me, but for probably most people, because it's not going to draw a crowd, and you can still do some really awesome stuff. It's got plenty of power. Power to weight ratio is definitely there for this little guy. So one thing people want to know is, can I get this under 250 grams? Well, it's supposed to be 160 out of the box. Now, mine is checking in at 171. Now, you know, I have updated this strap. It's bigger and heavier. I added a receiver. You know, there's some extra electrical tape and zip ties and things. So yeah, so we could probably cut some weight there. But when you add a battery, it's going to add some more weight as well. So that's going to be a little bit tricky. Now, I flew it on the 550 milliamp hour battery, and that's checking in at 260 with that. You know, like I said, you could probably cut about 10 grams and get it just under 250 with something like that. But I found the performance to be much better with a 850 milliamp hour battery. Now, both of these are 4S batteries, so keep that in mind. So maybe flying on 3S might do it, but you know what? Flying on 4 is a whole lot of fun. So, you know, kind of depends on what you're looking for and what you're trying to accomplish. But either way, it is a much lighter drone. There's no way you're going to get a 5-inch anywhere near that 250 gram weight, right? Definitely lighter than the 5-inch counterpart. So what do you guys think? Are you guys ready for the DJI FPV experience? You know what? It is absolutely fantastic. I have to say that once you go DJI, it's hard to go back to analog. And, you know, unless you're flying little whoops, right? I don't see these guys, this is the Mobula 6, make it into the Air Unit size anytime soon. But really, you know, when it comes to it, everyone I've, you know, shared this experience with just absolutely loves it. It just brings a whole new element to flying FPV. It's so crystal clear. You know, let me know, what do you guys think? You know, is it for you? Have you tried it? Cost is definitely a factor here, so you got to keep that in mind. Anyway, good luck and happy flying.